You're watching Global Trade This Week with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to Global Trade This Week, the only weekly television show produced by someone in junior high school. Thank you, as always, Keenan, for managing all the doodads and buttons and switches from South Park Junior High. We really do appreciate that. But more importantly, we want to thank the great people at Cap Logistics who week in, week out, month in, month out, and I believe, are we at a year yet, Doug? We getting there?
I think close. I think it was November-ish. I'll have to go back. We're almost there. We're 9 months in.
We're getting there. They've done nothing but have incredible support for us. And if it weren't for them, we would not be able to bring you this amazing content. At least Doug's amazing content, week in and week out. In what has become a show that is more about predicting the future, taking a look at what we see in front of us and discussing those trends and trying to be ahead of the curve rather than discussing what is behind us. For those of you who are wondering why you don't see my usual quirky pictures behind me, but why you still see, as always, Doug's wonderful modern art, I have been relegated out of my office and my downstairs of my place because my daughter is with me, and she was in a live, she's apparently watching Ghost Adventures, and told me that I needed to find someplace else to work. So this is, when you're a dad of daughters, you generally do what, I don't know about you, man, but I'm weak for the kid. I pretty much just say whatever, and I found someplace else to work.
Well, the background, as long as you got the Johnny Cash Black rolling, you can fit in wherever. So I think we can check that box today.
Again, buddy, on brand. On brand. Yeah. We've got some pretty awesome stuff to talk about today. A little different than we normally get into, but I'm excited for it. And I'm super excited for your first topic because we've talked a lot about this, and I have not seen a lot of it. Well, I shouldn't say we. You've talked a lot about this. I haven't seen a lot of other people talking about it, and you have been very much Karnak the Magnificent and Nostradamus, Doug Stradamus on this particular topic. So, man, hit me with it. Let's get it going.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much for that intro. And it's kind of an unsexy industry, but we'll talk railroads for a couple minutes here, and I'll take it into two segments. So if you have been keeping up about the Kansas City Southern, which is the pipeline infrastructure railroad that goes from essentially down the spine of America from Mexico up to Canada, and you got a couple of Canadian railroads duking it out to figure out who's going to purchase it. First it was Canadian Pacific, then the CN came in and trumped their offer. There was some bickering back and forth, passive-aggressive comments between the two companies. CP, Canadian Pacific, jumped in recently and threw out another offer, which Kansas City Southern promptly said, no, thank you. So there's been 3 offers back and forth from 2 different companies. And it looks like Kansas City Southern is content with Canadian National, the CN. Now, nothing's transpired. There's been no official vote, so to speak. But, it's interesting. It's almost like the Kansas City Southern is the hot date for the dance, and everybody's trying to ask her or him out, and they're just their stock is growing and they're reaping the benefits. But it'll happen. It's going to be an amazing powerhouse and a connector, like I said, in between the spine of America. And the other thing I wanted to go into was, what does that mean for the rest of us? And coming from a sales background, Pete, I'm the consummate sales guy. Is I'm thinking, all right, so you got this amazing merger that will happen. Trust me, it will happen eventually. And what does that mean for others that are out there? And I think the success of this and an opportunity for others out there is going to be selling them what I would refer to as pick and axes to support the new network. A pick and an axe like you are a miner. Right, so there's plenty of people back in the day here in Colorado that owned the mine, but the companies I think that really benefited under the radar were the companies that sold the miners the picks and the axes, in that example, disposables, that you absolutely needed to maintain the infrastructure. So my point there is that if you provide services, if your company or companies out there that provide services to the rail industry, or you provide services to companies that provide services to the rail industry, once this merger happens, the guys that are selling picks and axes, as the infrastructure gets tied together and new commodities, or not new commodities, but new ways of transporting goods north and south is going to be very dynamic and very profitable for companies. So if you sell the picks and axes, I think that it's going to be very beneficial. And then the last thing I'll mention is the Kansas City Southern made a statement, blah, 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 blah. But the key words that they mentioned was that the statement is very beneficial for customers, employees, shareholders, the environment, and North American economy. So we spoke last week that the concept of the environment and its implications would be one of the top 5 speaking points of why this is a good merger. Speaks to volumes of not only what we spoke about last week, Pete, but just the changing importance and what companies are valuing. So anyway, pick and axes. The merger will happen. It's going to go up and down the spine of America, connecting North America top to bottom. And there's a heck of an opportunity, and I'm excited to see what transpires.
Wow. Lots to cover there, man. I think the first thing I want to talk about is this idea of the ancillary services that are associated with it and how that's going to grow. What I'm a little concerned with is, flush with cash and probably flush with an opportunity to try to control more and more. I'm worried about them getting more entrenched in this business and beginning to take over those services. The privatization, the purchasing of those, getting more and more engaged, and the lack of the ability of other people to be involved in it. As these service providers themselves, we've seen it in ocean, we've seen it in air certainly, begin to overtake it and privatize those, and the service providers themselves own it, they can begin to push out the people that the competitors' ability to gain access to them as well. And that's something I always get a little concerned with. But second of all, ultimately, I hope this is a good thing for everyone. You said in the beginning of your points here, people don't talk enough about rail. And this is one of the areas of the connectors, right? We have some degree of control on. As a nation state, we have some degree of control on as people who are consumers of logistics. We could do more with regards to the infrastructure here. We could put more money into it. We could do it as a government. We could do it as companies, but we don't. I've never understood why, and I think it's because it's just not as sexy as these other things that we discuss. But without stronger rail and without stronger infrastructure associated with it, we're never going to overcome our intermodal problem. The ship is only a part of the delivery part of this. And I think that now that we're looking at it from a NAFTA perspective, the CN, the Canadian National, right, and in Kansas City, the more we begin to do this and look at it as a transcontinental service, and it's being managed that way, maybe we can begin to look at it as a transcontinental investment. And that kind of money can do something much better for our problems with regards to logistics and infrastructure. So that's my take on it.
Yeah. The only point I'll make is it's now called the USMCA. I heard you drop a NAFTA in there.
You're like that kid in the middle of every college lecture I've done that says, "Excuse me, professor, but I think you used an incorrect term." And I just think to myself, I can't wait to grade your papers. I'm going to find some reason to knock you down a couple of points. But you got me, man. It's one of those deals. Like, I call it the new NAFTA. I've done that too. There was a period of time I was still calling things, CAFTA, Canadian American Free Trade. I mean, old habits die hard, buddy. I still call things CF 28s and 29s instead of CBP 28s and 29s. What can I say, bud? I'm old. I'm old. Gray hair, bald. I'm old, bud. I'm old.
Yeah. Well, I still call it New Coke, so I guess we're good there.
I remember what old Coke tasted like. I remember what Crystal Pepsi tasted like.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right, man. What you got? This is when the fun starts. Let's roll.
Yeah. The news the last couple of days has not been very pleasant with regards to what's going on in Afghanistan, and I'm going to stay away from what most people are probably seeing enough of in their news sources and their news fire hydrant. I'm going to focus on instead what it means for trade, which is not really being discussed very much. The amount of instability that we believe that we saw was actually a lot of stability with regards to trade. America and our allies' ability to bring some degree of stability to that region had a lot of knock-on, follow-on effects to the rest of the world, most notably in Pakistan. Pakistan has been enjoying a great deal of security and stability with their trade during America's occupation of Afghanistan, and while Afghanistan was building a more entrenched, forward-thinking government. In fact, the Taliban was able in a couple of weeks to go in and do what they did and pretty much destroy the government that was there, cripple what was happening, and put the entire question of what will be happening there economically in the forefront of most companies. Is going to have a cataclysmic effect on the Pakistani economy. There's really no other way to put it. Anything coming out of Pakistan now, you're going to have to question whether or not their neighbor is going to have some kind of security risk to it. That goes to other parts of the world as well, but let's just stick with Pakistan because of their very special long-term relationship. China recently came out today and said that they're looking forward to having conversations about establishing some kind of relationship with the Taliban. This also is interesting in that China has generally been even more, if you can imagine this, even more paranoid about terrorism, about radical Islamic terrorism than the United States and the West has. So the idea of them being critically involved in economic infrastructure in Afghanistan seems absurd until you think about using it as a foil against the United States economically and where it could land in the Belt and Road Initiative. We should never forget that Afghanistan is a nation that is amazingly rich in resources, whether it's lithium, some of what we consider to be conflict minerals, or other things that are used in this new digital economy. They do have a place in the future of the world as an exporter of these very important raw materials. However, given the proclivities of this particular regime that's probably going to be taking over, I don't see it becoming an important part of the export economy anytime soon, but we'll see. I think for now, Doug, what I'm mostly worried about is how it's going to affect the economy of Pakistan, an economy that honestly is reeling from COVID, an economy that's never really been able to get their feet underneath them, honestly, ever since India and Pakistan turned into two different countries. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah. Yeah, things are moving so fast. This thing, I was in shock this weekend to see the pictures that are originating from Afghanistan and the chaos. I just saw one this morning. There's people running down a runway trying to chase a U.S. aircraft that's trying to get the hell out of there. It's chaos over there, right? At least that's what the media is showing us. I truly believe it. That's not a smack on the media by any stretch of the means, but I agree 100%. I don't have enough knowledge on this one to make any comments because it is a moving target. You and I could finish this show, and there could be a press release on something crazy that's going on. I think Biden's talking this afternoon. It's so moving so quickly that I think long-term, you're spot on. That's the one country that's going to be impacted the most. To what degree and what other countries, I think it's TBD until this thing settles out and figure out what the hell the new norm looks like in Afghanistan. It's scary and it's uncertain for sure.
Yeah, scary times, man. And with that, it brings us to halftime, my friend. So what do you got for us for halftime, Doug?
Well, I got a couple things, and I saw this last week, which I know that you guys love it, is that DHL has decided to ditch their drones. So now that's going to refer to as D3. So when I move forward and talk about my disdain for drones, I'm just going to refer to it as D3. So DHL said that they're going to pull their parcel copter program, whatever that is, and creating and cease all drone development, which has said time and again, they're arguably the largest logistics company in the world, and they're realizing that drones are just nonsense. I think, Pete, I'm going to say it, I think drones are stupid for logistics. I think there's minimal activity, and the concept of somebody getting a cheeseburger delivered while they watch a Sunday afternoon football game by a drone is crazy. And I like it to the EV craze, the electric vehicles and trucks and stuff, where it's flashy, it's getting a lot of hype. There's all this private money being thrown at it behind big names that we know, and then suddenly there's a fall for grace. So I'm not saying there's a fall from grace from drones. I just think people are going to stop talking about them and back away from the unrealistic expectations of what they can and can't do in logistics.
Well, as always on the halftime show from Cap Logistics, Doug, I'm just going to have to tell you you're wrong. You're wrong.
Right.
First of all, buddy, when you were a kid, at Christmas, did you really want a remote controlled airplane and you didn't get it, but like your cousin did or your buddy down the street, you just hated them ever since? Is that what happened here?
No, they'd hype it up. My neighbor would say this is the best thing ever. It'd go off the ground. He'd smash it in the ground because he had no idea what he was doing. And then the next day he's playing with his green machine or big wheel. So, like I said, it's flashy and it's cool in the moment. Anyway, there you go. You're going to get me all fired up here.
Well, the idea that you would roll in EVs with it and all, Doug, in the words of the great Billy Bragg, here comes a future and you can't run from it. If you've got a blacklist, I want to be on it. There is absolutely no doubt whatsoever that these disruptive technologies are going to change everything with regards to moving whatever around. And you and I, we can sit here till we're blue in the face and tell these kids to get off our lawn. It's gonna happen. Unmanned aerial aircraft are the future. The military will start using it, and then it will be cargo. Now, it might not be delivering it to our houses, but it's only a matter of time before the military decides that having pilots sitting in South Dakota flying KC-130s is smarter than having their pilots in them being shot at. And once the military starts doing it, then DHL, UPS, and Federal Express will start doing it as well. And those pilots will get to go home at night to hear their wives scream and complain at them and make them miserable. Or husbands, as the case may be. I don't want to be unfair. So it's just a question of when, and those jobs will get smaller and smaller until you and I are being told by some disembodied voice of whatever 19-year-old is flying us on our A300 from Chicago to Denver. Thank you for flying whatever airlines. Probably at that point like Tesla Air. I get it. Okay, I understand. You think they're stupid. I think a lot of things are stupid, like Yankees fans and Wendy's. But the point is, man. We don't have to like it. I think it's going to happen anyway. Drones are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and their use. If I would have told you, Doug, 10 years ago, that so many people will be having their groceries delivered and using Amazon Prime, and that they'd be cutting their cable, and that you and I would basically have somebody who's never been on a date and doesn't have a driver's license producing a TV show for us that I do from my bedroom, you would think I was insane. But times change.
Yes.
And that's my take on time.
Well, we'll just agree to disagree on this one because we agree too often on this. So we'll continue to have this.
I guess we will.
Thread.
I guess we will.
But here's the most important thing before we jump into this, and I think the next round, Pete, you go first and I go second because your topic dives into mine. Yeah. But probably the most important thing on today's show is the fact that Trey Parker with South Park has decided to purchase Casa Bonita, which is the most iconic Mexican restaurant of all time. They're bringing it back. And the funny story is he had a private party there. He went to the owners and said, I want a cliff jump. Nobody's in here. I want to go off the cliffs because there are people in the building where you do cliff diving.
I know, yeah.
And the guy said, you can't really do that unless you own it. So we decided to buy it, and now he owns it, and it's coming back. So we're excited about that.
Is it true that the food is just terrible?
Absolutely. It's horrible. But that's not where you go.
I've never been, man. I want to see the gorilla. I want to see the cliff divers. But I've got to think about Mexican food. I will fight you. I will throw chairs at people if you bring me bad Mexican food. My friend Hector Estrada, who's at Richemont, the big jewel watch company. We have very simple rules. A Mexican restaurant needs to have been something else before it was a Mexican restaurant. We have all these rules about a good Mexican place. And I'll tell you right now, if I go to a bad Mexican place, I will get into a fist fight with someone for bringing me bad Mexican food. That and Cajun food. Bad Cajun food, I will drag you in the parking lot and we will have a moment. We will have a moment, my friend. So I need to go to this place. Maybe that's where you and we can get a high chair and we can bring Keenan. What do you think? We should do that sometime? Yeah.
Yeah.
We could have his birthday.
Raise our flag and have sopapillas.
Sopapillas, yeah. All right. So you have a very important, interesting sign behind you, buddy. Do we want to talk about that before I do my...
Yeah, so I quickly put it together literally like 15 minutes ago, and I don't know if you can see it, but the top word is one, and there's the letter 3, and then the word on the bottom is 1. So it's crafted. It says there's 131 days left to some event that's very important to most of the world.
That's right.
And that's the reason it's there. Tomorrow it will be 130.
Yep, 130 days. It's 131 days today until Christmas, everyone. And I'm starting to think that I should make an advent calendar for people in freight forwarding and logistics that's full of little, tiny 1-ounce bottles of liquor. Because every day we seem to come in today and there is more and more bad news about what we've been promised, which was some sort of resolution to what has been a pretty ugly return to our logistics processes. If you were to go to LinkedIn right now, or if you were to spend just a little bit of time reading the press releases on everything from toy deliveries to garments, even decorations, to be frank, what you're hearing from a lot of people is go out and buy your stuff early, which could be, a great marketing ploy to get us to do Christmas and, Christmas now, or it might be that people are just being very honest with you. And for people like Doug and I who work in this business, I tend to fall in that line, that things are very, very difficult right now and that they're having a hard time keeping up with the long supply chain, not just port to port, meaning from the time it gets on a ship until it gets off the ship, but manufacturing, the movement, finding warehouse space once something is done, obtaining a container and a chassis, all of it has gotten so bad that it leads me to get to this new catchphrase that just makes me want to say, I guess Christmas is canceled. I guess Christmas is canceled. I guess there'll be no Cabbage Patch Kids. There'll be no Tickle Me Elmos. You're going to have to look your little kid in the face and say, I'm sorry, but Santa thought you sucked this year. There'll be no toys for you. And I know I'm being pretty, hyperbolic here and facetious. It's not just about toys and all the rest of it, but it's an excellent exclamation point on the kind of year that we've had. The ocean freight industry, it blows up, right? We have this massive peak. Things slow down a little bit. Then we have another bout of madness while Chinese New Year happens. And then we tend to spend a while recovering until we go right back into our manic wackoness all over again. But it looks like we're going to use that period of quiet to sort of make up for all of this. And it's not going to get any better, bud. So I'm calling it. I'm calling it right now. Christmas is canceled, buddy. It's canceled. If you need something, I'd start looking now. If this is the first time in my life that when I walk into Target and I see all those trees and everything, I have a moment where I think, maybe I ought to buy it. Maybe I ought to buy everything right now and just take it home and stash it because I'm not so sure come the end of November, early December, this stuff's going to be around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's so many things to unpack, to use that term from what you just talked about. Even while you're just talking, I'm like the pandemonium buying and the Cabbage Patch dolls where people go crazy and everything else. In this day and age, Pete, you can go and find out what's the new thing, right? What's the new crazy toy that's going to be popular? Go buy a ton of them. And then sell them on eBay or sell them on Amazon and make a killing. But that wasn't my point. I just thought of that when you were talking. But so I'll see your Christmas is canceled, and I'm going to raise you to say that the retail storefront is going to come back in the fall because of a variety of reasons. Number one, you continue to see press releases on additional surcharges with final mile delivery, right? Extra fees here. I think FedEx just announced some new fees going into effect for fourth quarter. So you know what? If you want it, you're going to pay for it, and there's extra fees, residential fees, congestion surcharge, whatever. They're going to continue to hit. And then the concept that we've talked about, or at least I've talked about, that you've made fun of most of the time is BOPUS. You're going to get to a point where you're going to buy it online, and it's quicker to send that stuff to the retail store. And you bypass the extra charges for this, the extra charges for that. My markup, free shipping is no longer free, yada, yada, yada. And I think it's going to be a resurgence, at least seasonality, for the retail store because, like anything else in the world, warehouse space is crazy. It's expensive. It's at a premium. And so even if you want to import 5 times as much stuff, there's nowhere to put it. In a public third-party warehouse environment, it's costly, it's expensive, and there is zero capacity. There's a lot of capacity at retail stores. So let's just jam all this product into our warehouses across the country, if you're a retailer, and then do some e-commerce fulfillment from there, get people in to do some shopping, upsell them or cross-sell them with some services. I think Kohl's and Amazon have done a pretty good job of doing that. So anyway, I think it may not be canceled, but I think there's going to be a resurrection, a resurgence of a retail store and people willing, even with the Delta variant, to get in there to get their Elmo doll now.
Well, it would be magnificent if you were right, because I think that there's a lot of retail stocks, Bud, that would love news like that. And I did spend a little bit of time in a mall yesterday with my daughter. We hit a couple of stores, and I was pleasantly shocked to see how many people here in boring old Manchester, New Hampshire, were walking around our boring mall, more than I was expecting, just going around casually shopping. And if that's any indicator, I think you're probably going to be right. What I'm worried about, though, Doug, is if there's going to be stuff to put in that mall. I'm sincere. I think that there's a lot of companies that didn't take this seriously. A lot that did. But I think there's a lot of companies that didn't take the pending congestion and slowdown seriously, and they treated this year's peak like any other peak. I've never seen a peak like this. It feels like every peak every year gets worse and worse, but this has just been bananas, man. It's just been bananas. So I'm hoping that there's stuff to put in these warehouses to go and do my BOPUS with. Otherwise, I'm going to be making, I don't know if you did this in second grade, the orange with the cloves in it in the stocking that you gave your mom for the air freshener. I'll be doing that. I'll be making a lot of macaroni, macaroni art to give to people. All the stuff I learned in first, second, and third grade. I'm just going to do some very complex versions of that to give people for Christmas presents.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. We have to find that teacher that made those gloves for Barry Sanders at the inauguration, or those mittens.
Oh, the mittens for Bernie. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, so there'll be a lot of homemade gifts this year from kids that couldn't go out and get whatever. So.
Doug, this may come as a surprise, but there's a long tradition. Probably won't come as a surprise. I'm not kidding. There's a long tradition amongst sailors of handicrafts like knitting, needlepoint, cross stitch. So you're probably thinking like, hardy sailors out there doing scrimshaw and whittling and woodworking. Nope. Like guys on whaling boats were making stuff like corsets and mittens and sweaters and socks and stuff because they had nothing to do for months on end. So if you ever go to a whaling museum or a maritime museum, you'll be shocked to see that a lot of times, these guys were out there making sweaters and such. I bring that up because I make killer hammocks. So if I ever have time again, maybe I'll make you a hammock, Doug. Maybe that will be my love letter to you, my friend. I'll make you a hammock.
I think there needs to be a new segment called 3 Stories and a Lie, because I grew up in Kansas, live in Colorado. I know nothing about the ocean
really?
And how to sail or do anything. And so you could come up with these crazy stories about sailors used to do this and they used to do that. And you give 3 of them. One of them is so outlandish that it's complete BS. And then I'll have to guess which one is a lie.
I had the meanest captain I ever worked with, and I'm not going to say his name in case he's still alive and ever sees this. He was really big into needlepoint. And when I found that out, everything changed about it. Like I wasn't scared of him anymore. Like he's just this weird old dude that does needlepoint in the stateroom at night. And he terrified me. Just when I was a midshipman. But I couldn't stand the guy. But anyway, so I'm going to make you a hammock someday, Doug. I'm going to make you a hammock.
Bring it.
Yeah.
Nice. I'll check your craftsmanship.
Well, take us home, buddy.
All right. Well, another edition at Global Trade this week. We come to you Mondays, 11 o'clock Mountain, 1 o'clock Eastern. Keenan puts this thing out later in the day, so it's not live, but it's pretty damn close. And speaking of Keenan, Global Trade wouldn't be around if it wasn't from the CAP Logistics support team. Keenan leading the charge on that. He's behind us, pushing buttons and clicking levers to make sure we don't look like fools. We may talk like fools, but at least we don't look like fools. So we can't thank Cap Logistics enough for bringing it home. And with that, I think we're going to shut her down for the week. Pete, it was good. A little depressing on the Christmas stuff, but hey, you got to call it like you see it.
That's right. Yeah. And as always, thank you to the good people at Cap Logistics. To learn more, you can check them out at www.caplogistics.com. Follow them on LinkedIn and on Twitter. And with that, man, Doug, I can't thank you enough, man. Another great episode. Thank you, Keenan, back in the booth. And we'll see you next week.
All right. See you guys.